my goal with my clients is that they understand what they're doing and why, but I'll never really throw out like the biomechanics or like intricacies into there. Just because a lot of times they don't really care. Most of the time they're there to get healthy, move well. But I do like to tell them why I'm giving them 15 reps versus 5 so that they see what the intent is behind my methodology. What I've noticed is when I give them that information, like, hey, this is why I'm doing this, it gives them a little bit more like motivation, like to execute.
Hey, it's Ben Wise, and this is the Fitness Movement. The Fitness Movement is brought to you by Zor Fitness. Zor Fitness is my company and my platform to deliver training content to coaches and athletes like you. The site has educational resources on everything from program design and exercise physiology to skill progressions and movement breakdowns. And in terms of programming, we have our online training program, The Protocol, and I also offer one-on-one remote coaching. It's all at one place, zorfitness.com. Today we have Dayannara Muñoz on the show. Day, as you'll hear me refer to her, has been one of my athletes for quite a while, and I really wanted to sit down with her and have a conversation like this because, well, she's intelligent and well-spoken, also super cerebral around all things training, but also recently she made some big life decisions that I think a lot of you are going to be able to relate to. She was headed through her projected career path. She graduated from MIT with a chemical engineering degree and was doing more powerlifting, bodybuilding style training. And she went through her master's and was working on her chemical engineering PhD when she picked up CrossFit and we actually started working together. Then Day, with everything still going well, made the decision to turn away from chemical engineering and start full-time into fitness. It's a decision that we're going to go deep into on this show. Day is now applying her knowledge and research as an NSCA and ISSA certified coach at Telos Strength Conditioning in Tucson, Arizona. You can find her on Instagram at day.the.fitness.nerd. Now, without further ado, let's get into this conversation with former bodybuilder slash powerlifter turned CrossFitter and former chemical engineer turned coach, Dayannara Muñoz. Day, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Absolutely. So first thing I want to ask you about is how you spent your Saturday mornings for maybe the first couple weeks or months of us working together.
Yeah, I remember you would send over all those videos. I was new to CrossFit, completely new, barely knew any of the terminology. Most of my training was in the powerlifting or bodybuilding world. So just to grasp all of that information, I would have to go to like a coffee shop and just kind of like study up, kind of like what I would do with school. I would do the same thing, go there and just kind of like listen closely and try to grasp all of that information.
Yeah. So for people listening who don't know, I do like, feedback for different athletes, different ways. For you, I was doing like these screen records where basically, have a video, all your training videos on my phone and kind of scrub through and like, go over different technique stuff. But since you were fresh and basically like there's so many new things that you were doing, like those ballooned up so much. So you're basically sitting there with like my voice in your head. I feel bad for you.
It was a ton of information. I actually have the notebook I used where I would like write all of the stuff down.
That's awesome that you took notes.
Yeah.
Hilarious. So yeah, I mean, when we started together, you're one of the athletes that I'm coaching and, we're still working together. But when we started together, you were completely fresh to CrossFit. Like, I don't think you had like overhead squatted at all. Like, I think literally the first time like you overhead squatted was like when I wrote it for you. And like, there was basically like none of the movements you had really done. Yeah. Like what prompted you to like hire a coach as like, I'm getting into this brand new, completely fresh. Why not like go like the class route?
Yeah, I actually I think I always wanted to do CrossFit, didn't know how to approach it. I knew there was a better way. I did go to a local CrossFit gym here, tried out classes, and that
We
gym
did.
is, yeah, the gym itself is one of like probably one of like the top notch CrossFit gyms I know of. Like the owners are really awesome and all that. Super smart, both competitive people. They know how to train athletes really well. However, I knew like the class setting was not for me because like after going to like a few classes, I was like, there's so much that I need to learn. Like, you know how I am. Like, I did not know how to kip properly. Still learning, and like being inverted was new. All of the ollie movements were new. So I knew I needed like really individualized attention. So then I figured like I'd go and find someone who was like a reputable coach to kind of do one-on-one. So that's when I started my search for like who I wanted to hire.
Mm-hmm. Is there, well, let me ask this. Would you do it the same way again?
100%. Because taking on all that by myself would have been too much. And if I kind of just kept going to classes, I could have seen like potential for injury, knowing how I am, kind of like overdoing it. So just doing it with someone, so they're taking care of everything and they're guiding me, and it takes all of the effort off from me, like the brain work and all that, and I just kind of do what I'm told and learn that way. It
Yeah.
was way more individualized for me too, knowing like my limitations and all that.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting because I think a lot of people, assume that when you're a complete beginner in a particular area, not to say that you're a beginner to training, but you're a beginner to CrossFit, that like the class setting is the way to go. And, it's tough because like a coach isn't just going to be able to spend all their time on you when they're doing a class setting. If they're trying to be fair to everybody else. So it's like, if you're really advanced, almost like if you're a beginner, like both those demographics often get missed in classes. Sometimes it seems like to me. And I'm not saying that like individual design is easy for someone who's a beginner, because I think that's honestly, I think like coaching a beginner like remotely is like incredibly challenging. And that's kind of why I was asking you that. It's like, I'm not sure how good of a job I really did for you at the beginning, because it's really challenging to like go over all of the skills at the beginning. Yeah. So it's interesting to hear that you found value in that. I mean, it's good to
Yeah.
hear.
Yeah. I think I found a lot of value in it too, because I kind of like put myself in there like completely, where I was like, all right, I'm going to dedicate myself to this. And then the fact that you gave so much information and like the screen recordings and like you provided so much guidance throughout. It wasn't like you would just send me like a template or my workout and then just leave me to be for the rest of the week or however long. Like if I had questions throughout, you answered like within the day. Like sometimes you answer like within the minute, which is like hilarious. Like I get like responses right away, and then like guiding me through all of it. I would send you videos like out of nowhere, like this is what it looked like this morning, and then you would give you that feedback right away. So I think that's why it worked out so well with me as a beginner, because I think I had like you were so hands-on with it.
I'll also say I don't think that would probably work well for everyone. So people listening, you have to know your personality a little bit as well, probably. Like, if you're someone who is brand new, you might need someone there moving you around in space, like telling you how to position in real time. Like there's a lot of value in that as well. And even some of my athletes who are a little bit more experienced, I still like to get them, like if they're having trouble, I don't know, learning a muscle up, for example, I'll often have like, hey, do you have any like people that you could work with one-on-one who are local to you, who could like help move you around again in like real time, so that they can actually, and just give you a different look as well, because you're only going to get so many of those from me. Like I can only send you so many technique videos and like be like, okay, this is what we need to do, and like try to describe it in language, versus like, I can't manipulate you because I'm not there at that same location. So there's definitely challenges about it. I think you were a unique athlete where it was good for you. So when you were learning all these skills at the beginning, I mean, was that process like frustrating, or did you find like enjoyment in that?
It was definitely frustrating. It was both frustrating and enjoyment, right? I think frustrating because I wanted to already be like advanced. Like I already wanted to be a CrossFitter
Right.
before I was like even knew any of the movements. And so I
You want to be
know
able to
where I
do
wanted to be.
CrossFit. Yeah. It
Yeah,
doesn't feel
yeah.
like you're
And so
doing CrossFit when you're like learning all the skills separately.
exactly, right. And then like I wanted to like RX some like wads and all that, and I wasn't able to. And I like I would get like one movement down. I'm like, cool. And then after like realize how much more I didn't know. So it's like,
Mhm.
all right, like that was frustrating, but it was also enjoyable too, because it's like, um, I think because I have a training background where like I know where I started with strength training and then where I got to. So I knew it was going to be the same path where it's like I know where I'm starting with CrossFit and I know where I can get to, and I know it's a long path. So at the same time, I found enjoyment just because I had experience in another area.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like you can see that like, okay, I clearly was more of a beginner in maybe the bodybuilding space before, and I kind of worked my way up, and it's like, okay, that took time for that growth to happen. So you kind of like relate that to like, okay,
Mhm.
CrossFit's not exactly the same, but I can imagine that my learning curve is going to take a little bit for me to get to where I want to be, sort of thing. Is that what you're
Right.
saying?
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
okay. So let's back up. You know, you started CrossFit, but that's obviously not sort of the start of your athletic journey.
Mhm.
Um, Describe yourself from high school through overhead squatting that barbell for the first time. What does that period of time look like?
Yeah, so high school, I played volleyball for a year. And like not competitively, like I was not good at it. I just played for a year. You know, my school wasn't really that good, didn't have that great of a team. Other than that, I like never really worked out or did any type of training. So there was no athletic background there. I was more academically inclined, very studious type person. It was towards the end of my senior year, beginning of junior year, where I started strength training, just general resistance training type stuff. That's why I really started to dive into strength training, because I have that like very studious mindset. I started studying a lot about like different like training methods and all that. And so that's where I started dabbling with strength training. Kind of got really into it freshman year of college and went. That's uh, what I did for most of my time there. I didn't have any like athletic background. I just really liked strength training, and so I kind of really got into that when I graduated. That's where I started more of the bodybuilding, just because I had like 4 or 5 years of like a good strong basis of strength and muscle growth. So I figured I'd try out bodybuilding just for fun, kind of like a science experiment, right? See like what my body can do and how it looks like after a certain point. And throughout that, I learned a lot about like nutrition, what to do, what not to do, type thing. All the crazy misinformation that's out there. So I learned a lot during that period of time. Once I was done with that phase, that's where I went to more of a powerlifting route. Did that for about 3 years, and then found a CrossFit where I was humbled very quickly. I felt like doing like an overhead squat with like a 35-pound bar was not possible. Just doing that whole movement, it was just weird. And so that's where it was like, it was humbling, but it also made me want to get better at it.
Yeah. It's really interesting to see different athletes learning curves, like based on what they've done in the past, like strict handstand push-ups for you, or like day two, you're kicking up and doing strict handstand push-ups in decent sets. And I was like, all right, like we got this. And like you're doing like, you can do bigger sets of strict pull-ups. There's like a lot of the stuff that you can do that just like a lot of people can't do. And I think it's just because like you were saying, like the way you started wasn't with like high school sports, which is like what so many athletes have started with. It was like you basically started with strength conditioning and then kind
Mhm.
of went into more of the sports side of things like later on in your career, which is like flip-flopped of what like most average people do, where like they were a high school athlete and then they got out of shape and they're like, oh yeah, I got to get back in shape. So they get into strength conditioning. Um, It's really interesting that yours is just sort of like mirrored of that.
Yeah, yeah. And I see that a lot when we try new movements and everything where like my coordination just isn't there. Like I could muscle through something, but then if I'm doing something that requires anything more than an up and down movement, um, that's where things just it'll take a while for my brain and body to process it.
Yeah, I mean, there's just, I guess I always kind of like think of athleticism as it just being like your history of things that you can sort of relate to almost. Like, for example, if you can speak 6 languages, it's going to be pretty easy for you to pick up a 7th language because you're going to see like, I don't even know the components of language, but like you'll see all the underlying things that are similar of it.
Yeah.
Versus like, you know, if you're like me and not bilingual and you try to learn another language, it's going to be really tough for you. So, I think it just comes back to like, what was your background before that? So obviously athleticism is going to help with learning these skills. I mean, is there anything else that you think in particular was either not useful in learning skills, or on the other side of things, like was helpful when you're, again, trying to go through and learn all these different CrossFit skills? Anything that you saw as themes is helpful or unhelpful when you're doing that?
Sorry, can you hear my dog snoring in the background?
I cannot.
Okay, cool. But I have a French bulldog, so he's sitting here and he's snoring pretty loud. So I was kind of nervous he was disrupting it. Do you want to repeat the question or want me to go through?
So skills.
Yeah.
Was there anything that was particularly helpful or unhelpful when you're like, for example, if you're trying to learn double unders
Mm-hmm.
or trying to learn how to kipping pull-ups, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, sequence those things and make sure that the coordination doesn't break down. Are there any things that you found helpful or unhelpful in that process?
One thing that I found helpful was when like it was repeated a lot, right? Like the repetition method and kind of having pressure to learn something is what I realized helped me learn something. Double unders, like did not grasp it for a good while until I have a competition coming up that requires me to do double
Okay.
unders.
Yeah.
Magically, I learned how to do a double unders, right? And just doing them so much more frequently. And same thing with like kipping pull-ups, like never got the kipping movement. My brain didn't process it. Competitions coming up with kipping, magically understand how kipping works. So having pressure sometimes and like competing, and you like encouraging me to compete when I like would ask you like, do you think this is a good idea? Definitely helped with learning movements because being put under that pressure and kind of knowing like I have to learn how to do this for if I already signed up, there's no other choice. I got to learn. That helped a lot. And then just increasing the amount of times doing it, but also knowing to back away because you noticed it. Like sometimes I would text you and be like, double unders are like the bane of my existence. I never want to look at another jump rope again. And then just having your perspective on it, like there are days that happens.
Yeah.
Just like walk away and come back to it later or another day.
Yeah. I think there is a sweet spot to that where it's like, if you never allow yourself to get to the point of frustration, you're probably never going to accumulate enough practice where you actually learn the movement. But if you're like so frustrated every time you do it, like you're going to probably stop actually practicing because you'll just be like so frustrated, be like, screw that. I'm never doing double unders again or attempting them again.
Yeah.
That's really interesting about the pressure though. Yeah, I mean, that is definitely one of the things like you had kind of identified yourself as like, hey, I want to be competitive in CrossFit. I don't want to just like do it as like a training methodology. And yeah, I mean, that was one of the things I sort of did encourage you to do is like, hey, we're not going to like spend a big lead up and a taper to do this competition, but I want you to enter in a competition. Are there things like, again, I know it like the pressure from skill point of view, but were there other things that you kind of learned about yourself as an athlete through competing?
I definitely learned that besides like, I think I knew this already, like the performance anxiety stuff, like I get really nervous before that. But also I learned that like how much more I push myself when I'm competing. Like the amount of effort I put. I guess it's kind of like you just leave it all out there, right? And sometimes during like trainings when like there's metcons or something programmed, like I feel like I'm giving it a 10 out of 10, right? But then like I'll do it in front of people or a competition setting, like it's a whole different like performance than what I was giving on my own. So
Yeah.
that definitely helped a lot. Yeah. Just knowing how much more you can give when you're like under that scenario.
I often will, I don't know if I've ever like formalized this thought to myself, but I'll say, okay, this was like an RPE 10 for a training day. And like that's not an RPE 10 on a competition day. Like just like even like, you know, 100% being 98% of what you could actually truly give. It's like that extra 2% is completely different in how it feels and how your body responds in that moment. Yeah, like, I mean, I guess you really didn't have a lot of competition experience, like just in, I mean, again, you weren't like an athlete growing up. So it's not like you've had like this, bucket of experience that you can kind of pull from and draw from. Like these were like truly pretty new experiences for you.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like the only like really performance experience I've had is like in the military when we have to do like our physical fitness test, which is like really nothing. But that's like the most performance under pressure I've been put under. So it's really like it was very minimal, if anything.
Mm-hmm. All right. I want to go through your career path a little bit. And again,
Yeah.
the main reason that I kind of want to do this is because like for you, I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate to you because you're an athlete, you're a coach, and you're having to balance those two things. Like you're full-time into the fitness space. And it's like, you got to figure out how to, be your best self for your clients that you're working with, how to manage, maybe a class schedule and other things, and then also trying to be the best athlete you can be. So before we get there, let's back up. Take me through again, sort of the same thing, as to what we did with your fitness career now with like your professional career. Walk us through from like, again, like high school up till now.
All right, cool. So high school, like I mentioned before, I was very academically inclined. I knew that I wanted to go to a good school. I was more geared towards the science field, so really more chemical engineering type stuff. So I knew that
You
going.
don't have to like try to dumb it down. That stuff's like intense. I
Yeah,
remember you
so
sent me like a photo of you studying, and I was like, I don't know what any of these symbols or words mean.
yeah, so like I like anyone who knows me knows like I can nerd out on science stuff. Like anything science, like trust me, I'll nerd out to like another level. So in high school, I knew I wanted to go to a good school. I ended up going to and graduating from MIT, and I got my chemical engineering degree there. And during that time, like I mentioned, that's where I started like my strength training stuff, which was fun. But I also, in terms of like engineering stuff, I did a lot of research as well. So research more in the biotechnology, biochemical engineering field. I got a few papers published during that time. So I also did ROTC for the Air Force ROTC. So I already knew once I graduated college that I was going to go into the Air Force and do some time there. I loved it. I loved the Air Force ROTC and I loved the Air Force. So I thought I was going to make it a career for like the 20-year career. So yeah, and I ended up doing 4 years after I graduated. And now I'm in the reserves, so I'm no longer active duty. So I'll be in the reserves for the long term, but I didn't want to constantly move around. That was my big thing. I didn't want to move around. So in the Air Force, I was an aircraft maintenance officer. So I did more of the logistics stuff, not really engineering. So graduated college, did some time in the Air Force, also got my master's while I was in the Air Force too from Columbia University. So kept up with my academics there.
What was that in?
When I say it again?
What was that in?
That was actually in like information and knowledge strategy, which is more like product management stuff, which I got that degree in particular because I thought the Air Force was going to be my long-term career. And so that would have been really helpful with the career I was in terms of like logistics and management planning, all that stuff. So it went hand in hand with that, which is why I chose that degree. And it's super interesting information, but it wasn't engineering. So it wasn't the same as the science. But yeah, so once I got out of the Air Force, I actually went to the U of A, University of Arizona here, to start my PhD program in chemical engineering. And during that time, I realized that I would go, and this was super recent. This was like over the summer. And I realized that I would go into the lab and I would like constantly be looking at my watch, like, all right, I need to get out of here in an hour because I need to go train. By the time I feel nice and warm, I need like an extra hour for this and this. And I realized that I was centering everything around training and fitness. Sometimes I would be in the lab, and while something was running, I would sit in the like lounge, and I would just be looking up like CrossFit stuff, research stuff about like strength training. So I was just way too involved in fitness and like the training world to like not want to do it full time. And that's where I realized like I was prioritizing that over my school. And so that was kind of like the green light for me, where I was like, all right, I need to put this aside and kind of go full time into being like a coach and also training. So I could just be in that world 24/7. And so that's when I made the transition. I found a job here as a strength coach at Telos Strength and Conditioning in Tucson, Arizona. So that's what I do full time now. So yeah, it's been awesome. So it's been all over the place. Kind of had my hand in all different types of work, but I think this is where I want to stay.
So I have to imagine, you made it seem kind of cut and dry, like, oh, I'm thinking about training all the time, so let's go into the fitness field. But I'm sure like you were having like second thoughts of like, I've invested all this time in like my professional career up to this point. Like, did you feel like you were throwing any of that away? Like, was it a tough decision to move past that? Like, I'm sure there was a lot more thoughts going on in your head at that point. Like, what did that conversation in your head look like?
Yeah, it was a lot of it. Yeah, it was very back and forth. It was not an easy decision. Part of it was I spent so much time and effort getting where I was with chemical engineering and science
Yeah.
field. Like the amount of like
Time,
work I
effort,
did.
money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The amount of work I did, I just didn't want to throw it out. So it's like this is a lot to throw out. And to follow, what could possibly just be a hobby.
Right.
And so that was one thing. And then another thing too was just like kind of the perception of it, right? I try not to consider what everyone else is thinking, but inevitably I do. So just thinking like, man, basically just throwing all this out, like, what are people going to think? Like they're going to think crazy, going through like a quarter life crisis type thing. But at the end of it, when I really thought about it, it's more like, as being a personal trainer, strength coach, I think I have getting all the experience that I did in the science field, and then also the work ethic I developed through that. I think it made me a better suited strength coach, personal trainer, and I could like serve my clients better, because I'm so involved in like the research, just like learning all about the stuff about fitness and all that. So providing them the best I can. And also the fact that I'm so like into it that like, I just love it. Right. So then just bringing that like enthusiasm to their training as well. So at the end, I thought like it made me more suitable for the job and hopefully provide the best I can for people.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, like thinking about the common themes of you kind of embracing being uncomfortable and like doing competition for the first time as an adult, like for you to kind of step aside, from the career path that you've been taking, knowing that other people are probably gonna be like, what's she doing going away from that? Like, it's like a lot of those things are like really uncomfortable and can put you in a situation where like at least it feels like from your perspective that everyone's eyes would be like looking at you like, what are they doing? Like, when you're at a competition, it feels like everyone's watching you. Like when you make a big decision, like a career decision like that, it feels like everyone is like, again, like thinking about you. Is there anything, I don't know, like a personality trait or something in you that you feel like that maybe allowed you to like go out of your comfort zone to like make the jump from, again, your career to, I'm going to put that aside and go into fitness?
Yeah, I've been told by a lot of people that I have like I kind of become like kind of obsessed with things that I like. So like kind of like an addictive personality. So I
But in a
know that
positive sense.
in a positive, right, in the best sense possible. So kind of like jumping into this was kind of like I knew that I wasn't going to fail in it because I loved it so much. And that's how it was with everything. Like everything that I do, if I love it, I'm going to put myself into it completely. And so I just knew it would bring happiness, and that I knew that I was going to do as best I could in it.
Yeah. So take me through a typical week at the gym. Like what are your responsibilities there?
Yeah, so at Telos, I train people mostly in the morning and some in the evening as well. And then I have that nice little gap in between when everyone's at work, so they can't do personal training and stuff. So that's usually when I fit my own personal stuff in. So that's where I will do like skill work, all that stuff, strength training, all this, whatever you program. That's usually what I do during that time. And I'm also at the gym, I'm also in charge of like the social media stuff and all that. So anything you see on the social media page is probably me posting it. I write some blogs there as well. So all into that. But the gym is really like, it's really well run. Like the owners there are awesome, great people. So they really let me like take reign over the responsibilities they give me. They let me kind of like do it the way I think is best. And they like trust me with that, which is like the most fun thing. So that's pretty awesome. But yeah, so I spend most of my days like at Telos there. And yeah, train in the morning before my clients, then train clients in the morning, then train in the afternoon, and then do a few more clients in the evening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a pretty sweet gig. I can't complain.
Your mind's either on training other people or training yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Which actually kind of is a good segue here. So I was doing my homework, and one of the blogs that you wrote was on the benefits of personal training and coaching. And this is what you said. Quote, coaches are responsible for measuring progress and ensuring that the client is trending in the positive direction. This means that the client's only focus is to perform and execute. I thought that was really good. I had Brian St. Andrews on the show, and he at the time was coaching Matt DeLugos, and he said that performance, or what did he say? Let me make sure I get this quote. Execution is worshipped, is what he said, right? Which is sort of the same idea in my mind. Do you want to like expand upon that at all? And well, let me ask this first, because you're a coach and an athlete. Is it hard to like take off your coaching hat when you're being an athlete so that you can just execute?
Yes. Yeah. 100%. It's hard because like sometimes like this is why I also preach like trusting your coach, because I think because I'm like in this field, it's hard for me to trust other people regarding fitness stuff, right? So like there's very select few people who I trust with fitness stuff.
Yeah.
You obviously being one of them, because you're in charge of like all my training. One of the owners of the gym that I work at, Sean, he's like, I love picking his brain about this stuff too. He was a competitive CrossFitter, has a ton of experience in just anything fitness training stuff. So So yeah, when I train, I have to consciously make that decision to kind of take off that hat and just be like, all right, now I'm just following Ben's plan, what he set out for me to do, and I'm just executing. Because it is hard. Like if I overthink it, I'll start like thinking, for me, personally, I'll be like, I could do more. I could do more. You'll be like, build to an RPE 8. And I'm like, I could build to RPE 9. I feel good today. But like I'll have to stop myself, because if not, like that's where damage is done. Like I could easily damage myself that way. So having you there and just like kind of following that guideline puts me in a good spot. So it is hard to take off that hat, but at the same time, I make a good effort to do that every time.
Yeah. That's something that I personally struggle with a lot. Because like you said, like, it's easy, even if you have the best coach in the world, to say like, well, in my current situation, they don't know how I slept last night, or they don't know this or that. And it's like, at that point, you need to be communicating with them and it's still your fault. Right. So yeah, I mean, that's something that I think is maybe underappreciated in the fitness space, at least in like the people who are like working in fitness and then also being an athlete. Like, even if it's just like in the recreational sense, like you need to understand what things are going to benefit your performance and what things are going to impact you in a negative sense, because you're overanalyzing everything that you're doing. Which is like obviously one of the most challenging things about if you're trying to self-coach yourself, where you're sabotaging the coach that you currently have. It makes it really tough. So, I mean, is there any habits or rituals, behaviors that you go through to try to like create a little bit of a barrier between like, now's my time to train, like kind of step into that box versus like, again, like your coaching box, even though it's like the same physical space and like maybe the same space in your head?
Yeah. For me, I write everything out. That's just the way my brain processes things. So that's what I usually do, is like based on like, let's say I'm done with a client at 10 a.m. and I'll take like the next hour to just like either eat or something like that, write out the workout that I have planned, the training that I have planned, and then just kind of sit there, review it, kind of rehearse it in my head real quick, so that I could like meet the intent there. So that kind of just like gets me away from, okay, I just trained someone, to, okay, now I'm the athlete, just like rehearsing it in my head.
Super interesting. I've done that before and I've gotten away from it. And I find that if I can rehearse the things I'm doing in the gym before I actually go to the gym, or, as I'm preparing or writing this all like really easy or something, like if in my mind's eye, I like run through my session and be like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And then this is what I'm going to be doing. And then this is how, like the piece I'm going to be doing and how I'm going to be pacing it, that sort of thing. Like my level of engagement and just like you're saying, the intent of the workout is like so much improved. So you like write all your workouts down on paper?
Yeah. This little green notebook I have here.
Cool. You're not my only client that does that. Do you think that has benefit outside of just getting you focused in like an actual session?
Yeah, I do think so. Just writing it down. I like to review things on paper. I guess that's like my main thing. So sometimes like the screen, it gets me away from my phone. That's like the main thing. So getting me away from the screen is like the big thing. So that I could just write it down here. And then when I like update the Excel spreadsheet, go back and review it. That gives me a time to like kind of go back, because then I'm typing it in again.
Right.
And so that like gets me time to process it too. But also like writing it down too. Like if I have my notebook here, like I'll go to it after doing like a few sets or whatever, and just like write like felt good or felt bad, and just kind of give myself those little notes so that I can review it like the next week if I'm doing like similar movement or similar. similar thing. So
Yeah.
that's like usually the benefits that I like from it.
Yeah. I think the just getting away from your phone is super helpful for most people, or virtually everyone who's listening to this, because you're probably listening on this through your phone. So it's like, man, just like the ability to be able to put your phone somewhere else where it's not distracting you, and just be able to, like, even if it's, for a lot of people, it's just writing it on like the whiteboard or something.
Mhm.
Because even just like putting your phone on like do not disturb or airplane or something, like, still isn't enough for most people. They'll find a way to like sabotage and like spend 10 minutes scrolling somehow in the middle of their session. It's really easy to get into that. So yeah, I mean, I think you've got a lot of habits around training that's really set you up for success in a lot of ways. And it's like, just because someone has, puts the same amount of time in, and just because they do the same sets and reps doesn't mean that they're going to get the same adaptation that you get. And I think that intent and focus in the training is like a big part of what that's about, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Right. Like executing and having like a good thought process through it kind of have to be honed in. Um, and I think that was part of like when I was learning double unders, when I really was just doing the movement, like, just 10 minutes of unfatigued practice here and there, like just doing the movement. It just, I don't know if it was like I wasn't thinking about it as much, but it was like not clicking. But when I was thinking about it, like performing it under pressure at a competition, and kind of had more of an intent behind it, and really focusing on like things like the way my feet were moving, how I was jumping, my wrists. It's just like it clicked after that, just having more thought into it.
Yeah, it's interesting that, like, thinking about things more can either be like helpful or harmful to your performance. Like, it depends what things you're thinking about. It's like, even if it's still related to your physical performance. So it's like, even if someone is, again, focused on, well, my body feels this way, should I be doing this many sets of back squats? That's still thinking about your body versus like thinking about doing your, how you're pushing through the bar when you're doing your back squats. Like, both of those, like, your mind's engaged in what you're actually doing. It's not like you're off in la la land. It's just like the one, you're going to aid and get your best performance out of yourself in that particular moment. In the other one, you're kind of, again, like self-sabotaging in a way, if that makes sense.
Right.
So if you're working with say you're working with a client now and it's not yourself, are there like particular things that you want them to be like focused on? Or I guess like what I'm asking is, to what degree is it helpful for a client to understand physiology or how to, like biomechanics and like those sorts of things? It's like, how educated do you want your client, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Yeah. So my goal with my clients is that they understand what they're doing and why, but I'll never really throw out like the biomechanics or like intricacies into there. Just because a lot of times they don't really care enough. It's not like they're trying to become a professional strength coach or a professional in the fitness industry. Most of the time they're there to get healthy, move well. Each one has certain goals, whether it's strength, performance, or any of that. So it depends on what their goal is. But most of the time, they're not trying to learn all the intricacies like, oh, this is, how the quad is structured versus the hamstring, and this is what this work. Like, I don't get into that, but I do like to tell them why I'm giving them 15 reps versus 5, or why I increased the weight compared to what we did the week prior, so that they see what the intent is behind my methodology, in terms of getting to their goal. So I think that's important for them to know. What I've noticed is when I give them that information, like, hey, this is why I'm doing this, it gives them a little bit more like motivation, like to execute. So, because they understand it more and they know that's bringing them closer to the goal that they expressed. But I never really get into like the details of stuff unless they ask and they're generally curious. I'm more than happy to nerd out with them, but most of the time they don't really care for it, because it's not like they're like I said, their plan is to not be a strength coach. Their plan is to get a good workout in and train well.
Yeah. You have much better perspective than when I started. I blabbed way too much to people about stuff. But like, I don't know, like if I walk into Best Buy and I want to buy a new laptop, like I don't need to know how the motherboard works. I just want to know if it's like a good quality piece of equipment. It's a good price. Like, okay, I need to know a few things about it. Like what's the quality of the camera, or what's the RAM, and like, what does that actually mean for like my performance on it? But like, I don't need to know like every single intricate part of how it's working. That's like way too much information for the level of consumer that I want to be. So I think it's really easy as someone who's like in the fitness space to be like, want to like spill and like just like vomit all over someone with your information. But like, that's really not like what they need.
Exactly. Yeah. And like I could tell, like when I fall into a trap where I start going on a rant about like, about something that like some research paper that I read about like hypertrophy, and
Yeah.
I'll start getting into like I could see it in their eyes that they're like not paying attention.
They're like, yeah.
So, yeah. So that's what I'm just like, I'll be quiet now.
Oh man. They're like, okay, Day.
Yeah. Yeah. They're just like, shut up.
Oh man. So, I mean, where do you see yourself going in the immediate future? Not like way down the road, because that's hard to know, but like, in the next 5-10 years, like where do you see yourself in fitness? It could be
Yeah.
from a career perspective or athlete perspective, or both.
Yeah. So career perspective, I like to kind of get more exposure with like higher level athletes and all that within the next 5 years. And so kind of work with more athletes, but I also like working with the general population as well.
I was going to say, what type of athlete?
I like to work in the strength realm. So if I could just be like a strength and conditioning coach, that would be like legit. But right now, like my goal is to kind of just like learn from other people, kind of like shadow, see how people are trained, what works, what doesn't work. That's like my main goal, just kind of like take it all in. And then see where that takes me. But remaining in the coaching career field is where I want to go. In terms of myself as an athlete, there's so much more that I like need to learn. And I guess that's the exciting part, where it's like, I just want to continue improving, continue being competitive. I'm 28 now. So in 5 years, I'll be 33. I'll be a master's athlete in 7 years. So we'll see, like, if I could be like a top master's athlete, I'm down. So.
You're like me. I'm also 28, and I think the same thing. I'm like, oh yeah, 7 years, and I'll be able to finally compete in a master's division. I'm like,
yeah.
7 years is a long way away though, but it'll probably go quick.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm thinking 7 years of like good, consistent training, I could be pretty good, maybe. I just have to like stay focused.
Our listeners who are like 57 listening to this are so mad at us right now.
Yeah.
You're just a grand master at that point.
Yeah, right.
Cool. Any type of strength conditioning athlete, or you're doing strength conditioning, but like, is that high school and college athletics? Is that someone who's competing in powerlifting? What does that look like?
I would think, yeah. So personally, for me, I would like to go into the high school realm. Mostly because like, I think that's where, that's definitely like a field, I think, where they need more coaches that like have a passion in this than some like just
Quality.
Yeah. So just higher quality and all that. So that's definitely one thing. And I think like that's where so much potential is like untapped during that time, right? Like so many high school students like could like be great athletes by the time they're in college, but they don't reach that potential because of lack of quality of coaching or lack of exposure to proper training. So if I could go into that and that year group, I think that's where I would choose out of all of them. Yeah.
Kids are cool because they're so malleable at that point. Yeah. Like even in high school and college, it's like you don't have to spend that long, doing something to kind of like restructure yourself physically or mentally. Like you're just really plastic at that point. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So
a perfect timing. So that's where I would like to go into.
cool. All right, final question for you.
Yeah.
So say we have somebody listening and they're in a similar situation that you were a couple years ago, where it's like, not even a couple years ago, pretty recently, where they just find themselves like thinking about fitness all the time. They're in some other career right now, and it's like they've been kind of like wanting to make the jump into fitness full time. Maybe they're coaching like part-time at a gym or doing, some personal training or something. Do you have any like advice for somebody if they're like trying to, or like figuring out if they're trying to get, make the jump? Basically, they're getting ready to go into fitness full time. Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah. My first, like now that I've done it, like I have this whole new perspective where I'm like, follow your passion, do what you love.
Like the guy with the sign.
Yeah, exactly. So that's like my perspective now. But like looking at it more realistically, one of my big suggestions is like learning from people who like have a ton of experience, finding those people, finding those mentors. And kind of taking a step-by-step approach. So like if you're doing well professionally, because you have to look at things also like realistically, like financially and all that good stuff. So you have, yeah, forget that. So you do have to consider all those things. So like, don't just like jump out of a good job and go work at like some commercial gym with like one client. So the biggest thing I would say is take like a step-by-step approach, be realistic, come up with a good plan and take a step approach where like, I think I was lucky where I got out of the military, was going to school. So I was already taking like a big jump there, but I was working part-time at a gym too. So because I was working part-time, I got to get a feel of like doing personal training a little bit more often than what I did before. Because I always did it before part-time, but not as often. So this like increased the amount of exposure I had to it. And then from there, just doing it more often, it's kind of like, okay, this is where I belong. This is what I like to do. I got to make more of an informed decision. So finding the right people and creating a good game plan where you could kind of like take that step-by-step approach and be realistic. I think those are like the two big things.
I love it. Day, thanks for doing this today.
I appreciate you, Ben.
Hey, it's Ben again. Thanks for listening today. To be completely honest, it's been really rewarding to have people who listen to the show regularly reach out to me, whether they have a question about training or just to say hey. So if you haven't done that yet, do it. I'm pretty good about getting back to people, and you can feel free to email me, ben@zorfitness.com, or message me on Instagram @zorfitness. And graciously, I've had some people reach out to me and ask how they can support the show. Number one way that you can support the show if you are a regular listener is just by rating the show. Most apps have a platform where you can actually rate it, and on Apple Podcasts, you can write a review as well. This is super helpful in having other coaches and athletes find the podcast, but also just having it grow and for me to continue to want to put out more and more content. Also, I'm going to be posting more full episodes of the Fitness Movement to our YouTube channel. So if you're someone who actually enjoys seeing my face when I talk, you can head over to YouTube and subscribe if you please. And if you're someone who is watching on YouTube, you have the ability to like our videos, but then you can also comment on the video if you have questions about the episode or if you want to suggest a topic for a future episode. And lastly, if you're someone who really does value what we're putting out, I would encourage you to hire a coach. For me, coaching is the bulk of my job, and it's what I believe I do best. So if you're an athlete or a coach looking to up your fitness game, be sure to reach out. You can message me on Instagram @zorfitness or email me ben@zorfitness.com. Thanks again for listening today, and as always, stay the course.